Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's Record Review, the only first listen, always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor immediately after leaving the gym. So today I'm going to be reviewing an album by D Smoke. It's a rap album, and I was immediately sort of like taken off guard by how polished it was for somebody I'd never heard of. So I did a little bit of research, just the minimal amount, and it turns out this guy won a reality TV show. Some reality TV show on Netflix. And so, my first take is always, if it's associated with reality TV, if it's associated with basically anything on television, then it has to be inauthentic. Just dismiss it altogether. But then I remembered one of my favorite albums last year was Melanie Martinez, and she's a reality star. And like I said back then, I think we basically just have to erase the old conceptions of authenticity. I think they're dead. I think that reality stars and YouTube stars and any way that anybody gets fame through a commercial, infamy, whatever it is, however anyone gets famous at this point, I think we just have to accept it as the new paradigm, the way things happen. So with just a little bit more research, I discovered that I loved this guy, just on principle. You see, he went to UCLA, and he majored in Spanish. And then he went and taught in high school in his home of Inglewood, California. So when I was listening to this album, there's all this Spanish thrown in. And I was like, I shouldn't be understanding all this Spanish, but I understand it all. I have an intermediate level of Spanish. And I'm like, how is it that I understand? And I get it. He's a language teacher like me. It's not his native language. He raps in Spanish, maybe to get more fans, maybe to show respect to the Spanish community where he's from in Inglewood. But I think it's mainly because he's a language professor like me. And he's sort of spreading the good word of the importance of learning another language. Even if you're an African American who doesn't have the right to speak Spanish, why don't you have the right? Does he have less of a right to speak Spanish than someone who's born in Mexico does to speak English? Of course not. So basically, upon reading his biography, I quickly went from this guy is lame to I'm really going to love this guy. Now, the criticism I would say that I would give to this album is also part of its strength. I think the description I would give is all things to all people. By that, I mean, it's like he's trying really hard, I think, to be positive, to be conscious, to appeal to women, to men, to a white audience, to a black audience, to a Spanish audience, to a young audience, to an old audience. He's interweaving very heartfelt personal stories with larger comments on society. In some ways, he's sort of like the ideal version of what people wish hip-hop could be. Like people who say, I don't like all that mess about drugs and crime. Well, this guy is the antidote for that. But I don't think that should immediately discount it either. Actually, I think to the contrary. I think that this rap, which is now just classified as alternative or conscious, actually is a better reflection of what hip-hop started off as being. If you look at old school versus new school rap, you can just look at it in terms of the style of samples and the cadence and the way the rhymes go. But I think when it comes to the relationship between rappers and society, that's the primary difference. In old school, it was describing the oppression of the African American people. It was just a description of life in the inner city. When it reached the new school, and in particular with the gangster rap and those that would follow, what we call mainstream rap, it went from describing the oppression to participating and profiting from the oppression. So the figure, if you think about the fact that so much rap is about how great it is to sell crack, it would be like a New Orleans rapper rapping about how great Hurricane Katrina is, It's terrible. And actually, it's mentioned in this album. He makes direct reference to how crack destroyed Los Angeles. And I think it's really worth giving extra attention to positive or conscious rappers, not just as trying to be some kind of antidote, trying to act better than the mainstream, but as a really necessary counter force to this really strong narrative, which fundamentally does the opposite of what hip-hop was supposed to do in the beginning, in a way. I'm not trying to be moralizing here. I'm not Bill Cosby. I'm not saying pull your pants up and put your guns away. I think gangster rap has a really important function in society as well. I don't think it should go away. But I think that these counterbalances make hip-hop much richer. In general, his rhymes are very smooth. He doesn't have the greatest or most memorable flow, but I do like the way he mixes in Spanish. his Spanish that I can understand, which is a good sign. The way he mixes in Spanish and the way that he often has very smart rhymes, but they're not labored, right? He's not a smart rhymer who's like, the sarcophagus or, the hypotenuse. I don't know why those are the only smart words I could think of. But he's not trying to flex his college degree here. But at the same time, he very clearly is a very educated person. That comes through in the way that he rhymes and a lot of the themes that he covers. As far as the production goes, I would say this delivers on the promise. Okay, when To Pimp a Butterfly came out by Kendrick Lamar, it was revolutionary and nobody heard anything like it, I don't think. He took a lot of the sounds of West Coast hip hop, but then filtered it through jazz and used real musicians and live musicians and just created something that was just this mixture of soul and jazz and hip hop, and it just blew your mind. But how the hell can you follow that up? You can't. No one can do anything as good as that. All you can do is just follow what he did and hope it's almost as good. That's the production on this. It very much feels like it's kind of a mixture of jazz and soul and live musicians, a little bit of gospel, and it's in that vein. And as I always say, what's the point of a revolution if nobody follows you? I want more artists to be following what Kendrick Lamar did, because, even Kendrick Lamar didn't try to do it again, right? That's how difficult that album must have been to produce. So that really is, I would say, the production. So I'm going to go through a little bit on the album in general is very strong in terms of its cohesion. It's called Black Habits, and most of it is about being an African-American in America, being an African-American in California, his life growing up with a father who went to jail and then came back, having a strong mother, having brothers, having a good family unit, and sort of the life that he exists, where he lives and the way that he perceives of the dominant culture, white culture, oppressing him in many different ways. It starts off with a track called Morning Prayer. It's a little bit saccharine, but it kind of gives you the idea, of the mother telling her kids to grow up and be strong. And that leads into a track called Bullies, which is just excellent. Solid, great rhymes. It's sort of about the nature of bullying and personal responsibility, and it's pretty nice. It ends with this funny thing where this guy's like, there was this guy named Bully, and the Pyrus, were afraid of him. The gangsters and the Bloods were afraid of him. The Crips were afraid of him. Bloods were afraid of him, and everyone was afraid of him. And they go, "What happened to him?" "Oh, he's dead," which I think is a really nice save to that story, because it's sort of indicating that we're sort of all bullies in our current society. Is the point that he's making? So I don't know. That's a good point. That then leads to my stamp, No Commas. I'm going to play you a little bit of this track. It's just a really smart, strong track. It's about his ambition. It's about his desire to be more. But then also it ends up being about what's happening to lower income communities near rich cities. It's about gentrification in part. But what I want to do is just play you a little bit of the beginning so you get a sense of what his rhymes are like, what the production is like, in case this might interest you, because this is a pretty exemplary song. So No Commas by D Smoke.
We could take a loss, we gon' get it right back. We could take a loss, we gon' get it right. We could take a loss, we gon' get it right. Yeah, I could be your boss, put game in your life. Or you could spin your wheels, that chain off your bike. These niggas on their heels, they faint in a fight.
So, pretty strong West Coast sounds, the kind of harpsichord. There isn't a lot but it's very noticeably West Coast. You also saw the cover there. I could do a whole video about rap artists using family photos on their covers. I think it's pretty interesting. I think it speaks to the nature that a lot of times, a lot of what rappers rap about is the destruction of the family. So maybe these pictures emphasize that or highlight it. I should, if I get 1,000 subscribers, I will do a short essay on that. Why did I say that? Oh, well, it's true anyway. I'll do that. So you got a sense from that, the nice production, the good rhymes. But then at the end, he goes on this whole jag about gentrification. And I actually just want to read it to you, because not enough rappers are rapping about this, right? Harlem is gone. It's just gone. I mean, whatever Harlem used to be, it's at least going. It's at least being completely taken over by speculators and people who want to live near New York and have a lot of money to spend. And the same thing's happening to Inglewood. If you've never been to Inglewood, well, when I lived in Los Angeles, Inglewood was the place where the airport is. That was it. That was the only way I ever thought of it. Just the place where the airport is. And it was also, for the most part, a fairly lower income African American community. So here is the lines from the song. They buying everything in my city lights, property value rising, they're gonna gentrify. This ain't rocket science here, let me simplify. We think we owners, but we only renters, why? The system ain't broke, it's designed to keep us declining until we reach the bottom line and can't see the sky. Swimming in our misfortune, distorting our vision, eyes glisten. And then like the producer in the back starts like going, Smoke, chill out. Remember that our fallen peers are listening. Hey, chill out, Smoke. Sorry, my dear, they eat that venison. Hey, shut the F up. With no remorse, resort to militants. And shut the up. And they shoot up a church, mosque, or that temple. You trying to get us killed? And when we shoot up ourselves, while everyone aiming at someone like me, brown skin, kinky hair, walking like my Nikes, town, Inglewood, about to belong to Whitey, unless we buy this up and fry it up like a snapper, invest in our own society. So I don't think that Smoke, this guy, can undo gentrification, but he's at least describing it in real time. And as far as I can tell, this is the most clearly enunciated expression of this phenomena that's happening that very specifically targets African American communities and destroys them for the benefit of people like me. I've been a part of this multiple times. I went into Oakland, I gentrified it. By the time I left Oakland, I went in, it was kind of like a sketchy part of town, like this old video store and some like places to get like hair weaves. By the time I left, there was like a boutique apothecary. I'm not joking. And like a knitting store. And like, you know, I've been a part of this my whole life. You know, I'm a privileged white guy. And part of my role in society has been to go in and kick African Americans out of where they live so that I can live there. I'm not happy about it. I only realize it now in my middle age. I didn't realize it at the time. I wasn't sitting there curling my mustache saying, I'm going to do this. But he's forcing me to confront my own complicity. And if you can't listen to art that forces you to contemplate your own complicity, then you're a coward. Okay, keeps on going, a track called Gaspar Yenga, which has one of the rarest things in all humanity, a good Snoop Dogg featuring. I hate it when I see Snoop Dogg's name on a track because he's just gonna like show up, take his check and be like, oh, fizzle dizzle, smoke 'em up, dizzle fizzle, smoke 'em up, and then go Long Beach and then go home. But this, he's restrained, he's not doing a lot. It just actually kind of helps with the West Coast vibe that's going on the rest of the track. It's got this amazing sample. It's some kind of world music sample, and you have to listen to this track. And then you can tell this guy went to UCLA and that he studied like Spanish literature, Hispanic culture, because it's named after like a Venezuelan escaped slave who became like a tribal leader, Gaspar Yenga. That's the kind of stuff you can learn when you go to college and you study language, damn it. Okay, sorry. At times, a song Top of the Morning, he's a little bit too proud of himself for his own consciousness. A track called Sun-Kissed Child, it's a little bit too positive, a little bit more of that kind of all things to all people. It feels sort of like a Stevie Wonder song, like a woman's voice coming in and singing gently, not really what I like. Then it's saved by a track called Black Habits, just all about the way that African Americans are perceived and the way they perceive themselves. One of my favorite things is he actually makes he says, you know, pray to Black Jesus and listen to Black Moses. I just happen to have right here, I'm next to my CD collection, I just happen to have my copy of Black Moses. And I believe he actually samples an Isaac Hayes flute in this song. You should listen to Black Moses, by the way. It's a great album. So it's a great example of what conscious rap can be. Again, he's sort of putting himself and black culture under a microscope and criticizing while also praising it. The track Fly is kind of a low-key song about success. He never really flosses. He like gets close to flossing and talking about how rich he is, but never quite gets there. There's sort of this weird like new moralism that's coming in, like this moral voice of hip-hop. I think, Kanye going Christian and Chance the Rapper's album. You hear that a little bit in this track where there's a featuring person who sings about monogamy and how happy he is to be with his girlfriend. Again, it's probably a positive trend. That we at least have this counter, as opposed to like, I F your B, I F your B, I F your B in every track. If it's like, I don't F your B, and nobody F's my B, and I'm not a B that's F'd. I think that's a positive sign. Then we sort of get to like this middle section where we have a very confused relationship towards women. There's a song called Falling, which is like about being a bad boyfriend and cheating on your girlfriend, and it's kind of like this nice real life song. And then there's a song called Lights On, which is all about strippers and like throwing your money at strippers and touch your toes or touch your ankles. She's like, oh, come on, man. It's like, if you're going to be positive, be positive. Don't be positive and just have like one song that's like all about stripping. You know what I mean? And then the next track is called Real Body, which is basically an ode to stretch marks. It's like so much of the song is all about how much he loves the imperfections of the women that he's with. And it comes right after, and he's kind of like snapping back and forth. Like, which is it? Are we objectifying women? Are we glorifying women? This is a song that feels like it, to me, it's this all things for all people, sort of written so that, women can listen to it and go, oh, he's nice. He likes my imperfections. I like him. It feels like it's written for the people he's singing about, which isn't always a good thing. But then he comes back. There's that little misstep, but then the end of the album ends really strong. The track Free is again about institutional racism, very dark beat. He ends talking about having cancer and going through chemo. Did that happen? Are you a fan of him? If you are, can you tell me, did this actually happen to him? Because it's a pretty moving song about going to Kaiser Permanente, one of the world's worst health systems, and going through chemo, but I can't tell if it really happened. And then there's the bombshell track, Like My Daddy. So right before Like My Daddy, you hear the sentencing, like you hear the freeing of his father from jail. Like, you are now free. And then the whole song goes through, and it's a sort of touching story about this father who apparently wasn't completely absent. We learn at the end of the song that he was freed at some point during D. Smoke's childhood. And you sort of hear about these questionable messages that the father teaches him. He learns how to tie a tie, like standard images of father-sonness. He has a whole thing about being caught masturbating and then being taught how to be a womanizer, which is maybe a little bit questionable. But he's just basically saying, like, I'm like my daddy because I hustle. I'm like my daddy because I hustle. And I'm like, all right, but you're not like your daddy because you're not a criminal and you don't go to jail. So it's interesting, his relationship to his father. And then he starts singing to his own kid, and I was sitting there crying at the gym. I'm a sucker, okay? You write a song about your relationship with your father and then your relationship to your kid. I, as a father and a son, I'm always going to cry because it's beautiful. It's a beautiful track about how he's trying to model things for his kid. And then he talks about how he repeats the verse, which originally said, I'm like my daddy, I'm glad. And then he says, I missed my daddy, I'm sad. So he talks about this sad and this absence that he felt. And it ends up being really strong. And then it ends with a quote from his father talking about his life and about how when he returned from jail, he just basically did whatever his wife wanted him to do because she stayed true to him. And so he just raised the kids while she pursued her career. So it ends up this kind of weirdly super positive family story, very feminist family story about a woman being permitted to be the primary breadwinner for her family. I guess she like wrote commercials like for M&Ms, like not M&M, like, Mom Spaghetti, like M&M, like the candy. So it's cool, right? Like, how many songs in general do you have that make a very strong point about a father being at home raising his kids? It's great. It's really great. And I say it's like all things for all people, but I think that in a good way because he's telling a story that hasn't been heard. That must have been why he won this reality TV competition, because the story is so moving. I want to vote for him, and I don't even know if you could have voted on it. And then there's the last two tracks. Closer to God is with his brother, who's also a musician. Very kind of meaningful, another gospel-style track, but it puts into question the relationship between him and faith and our complicity in other people's suffering and the selfishness that would allow us to ignore the least of our brothers. So it's good. It's a gospel song, but it's also critical of religion. And then ends with Black Habits 2, Electric Boogaloo. Okay, there's no Electric Boogaloo. But Black Habits 2, maybe the best lyrics on the album. The jazzy notes that have been throughout the entire track come out to play. They really, very resurgent, a very jazzy track. I think he even mentions Thelonious Monk in this track. Maybe it's a different one. But again, that's following that Kendrick Lamar model of creating this different style of rap music that's conscious and braggadocious, but also about LA and about where you're from, and also about what it is to be black, and about what it is to be black and successful, and to be black and poor, and to be striving. All these things, it's in this album. I don't know if this album's going to do well. I don't know if I'm doing a review of something that's going to win all the Grammys next year, or if it's somehow going to get forgotten. I think it should get a lot of attention. I think it's worth a listen. I think it could even be a very important album if we let it. In conclusion, learn another language, would you? You could be cool like me and D Smoke. I'm not French. I have an accent. You don't have to be perfect. Just learn another language. Okay? And you have teachers like me and D Smoke. One of us is a very successful rap artist, and the other one of us is the only new music review show hosted by a French professor. Okay, until next time, for Isaac Hayes, there's the camera.